Excellent.
Higher the how
Right.
higher the
So and the accountability is two ways, meaning that I can either get really high, or I can get either really high reward or I can get a very high punishment, right? So this is the danger of entering these positions. And part of that is because the positions are voluntary, right? Nobody's forcing an individual to seek a leadership position. Nobody's forcing someone to go and seek knowledge, right? These are things that a person can completely volunteer. Oh, I don't think I forgot to connect this. Okay. So when an individual is, he goes to teach, right, it can prohibit him from seeking knowledge, and it will entice him and bring him into more ignorance. And this is something that an individual needs to be wary of when they seek knowledge, or if they decide to enter a field in which they want to teach. And in general, this seeking those leadership positions, we said, is what? Discouraged. Except for who? So he didn't put knowledge as the, yeah. What's the word he used? I want you guys to think about it. Who, if you have, because what is a right? Qualifications that a little bit have to do with it. Yeah. But I'm saying in any field or any position in which I have a power and authority, who should enter those fields? Okay. Yeah, that can be a bit indicative, because the thing is, like, okay, well, a person who enters the field to teach, is it because he right? So, well, qualifications is a very important part of it, right? What else is an important part of it? Sincerity is a huge part of it too, for sure. Is it possible that a person is sincere and a person is qualified and they still fall to the temptation of the power? Yeah. They do. So you have to be strong-willed. Right? That's what the most important characteristic has. Meaning that if I know I am weak, then what? And not should. I am obligated right? to stay away from such positions, because if I am given that authority, what am I going to do with that authority?
you might you might fall into
I'm going to abuse it.
Yeah, abuse it.
Right? I'm guaranteed to abuse it. And Ghazāli, he talks about different ways for an individual to know if they're deserving of that authority, or if they can handle the authority. And what are some of those ways that he mentioned and spoke about? Or what are some things that you guys can think of? How do I know it's okay for me to be in a position of authority? If I've, what?
You know, you've set out some goals and you feel like you're disciplined, like
Okay.
somebody of disciplined nature is able to push against their like ego.
Okay. How do I know I have a disciplined nature?
You've been in several positions.
I've been tested before. I've been in positions before, right? They might not be to the same magnitude, right? Or they might not be to the same gravity. But I've been in a position before where I was given authority, and how did I feel when I was in that authority? It didn't influence me, right? I didn't feel like it affected me. I felt like it didn't have a negative effect. I'm good? Oh, the screen. Okay, it might not be connected to the right network. So make sure it's, make sure it's connected to the right network, because sometimes that gives problems. But regardless, if I've never had the experience before, then there's no way for me to know if I can go. So should the first position I seek be that of the highest authority possible? No. No, it shouldn't. And the reason for that, because it's very easy for me to fall to that trap. So I have to put myself, or I have to allow myself in positions where I have lesser authority. And what are the things I should try to be aware of? Try changing the network. That's the problem I've had in the past. Oh, no, if it's connected to staff, then that's the right one. But so if I found, what should I look for when I'm in that position of authority? Like, what kind of self-awareness do I need to have, and what do I need to be self-aware of?
Like, does it spur pride in you? Does it, do you feel like a lust for power? Like these kinds of things.
Okay, right. So if I enjoy, right, is there a difference between enjoying the job, enjoying the position, and enjoying the power? Can we tell the difference? Yes, right. Very easily we can tell the difference, right? It's not something that's very difficult to differentiate. And if we understand that we're able to do this through testing ourselves, not in the sense that we kind of we drown ourselves, but we put, right, like what I mean, like we do like a little test run, like maybe putting our foot in the water just to see how we go, or being given positions of authority. Where's a good time for us to help each other do that? Does everybody deserve a chance at authority? A chance. Yeah, right. Why not? Because I have no data to prove otherwise, right? If this person has never been given that chance or that opportunity before, is it fair for me to be like, oh, it's very possible you will be tested with power?
What if you're like incompetent though?
But that's a discussion around qualifications, right?
This is like spiritual.
Right. Yeah. This has to do more. So, what is a good way for us as community members, as family members, as friends? What is a good way to create those avenues to allow everyone to kind of have that experience?
Volunteer for
Okay.
an event, see how like you deal with the different things that might come up, with
Okay.
kids misbehaving, the people wanting the money spent this way. It gives you an opportunity to, it's like a microcosm of
Sure.
the larger situation.
Okay. So volunteering, right? That's a great opportunity for me to experience, because at the least, if I'm in a volunteer position, what is the first position I'm going to experience? Right, being a helper, right? So, and I might get into that helper position. I'm like, man, this really sucks, which is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what should I judge when I'm in that position?
Your capacity as your assistant with whatever you're doing.
Okay, like I can judge my qualifications. Like, man, am I really equipped to do this? Good. What else?
Your motive.
Right. I can check my intention, make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. What else?
I think when you're in the like most junior position, you are like, the experience is great and you're like, oh, it's great because of the person in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like, oh, would I want to emulate them? Or you start to be like, oh, they're such a bad leader, I could do this so much better.
Sure.
That's when you start to feel those kind
Okay.
of emotions that might be like, oh, if I was only in power.
Right. So now when I'm in that position, one very easy thing to see is, do I have a problem taking orders? Right? That's a really simple one. And if I have a problem taking orders, what does that tell me about myself?
Ego.
I have an ego issue, right? And is it okay for me to disagree with how somebody's managing something?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But if I disagree with the managing style, does that mean, number one, that person is wrong?
No.
No, not necessarily, right? It just means that, okay, well, I feel that this way would work better for me, or it might work better in this situation. But the fact that I have trouble taking orders, that is a huge red flag that we need to be self-aware of. Right? The moment that somebody tells me to do something and I start feeling that prick at my heart, then what do I need to do? I need to take a step back. I need to check myself, right? I need to check myself hard. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I feeling like this? And like Ghazāli had mentioned in the previous chapters, that the moment we start getting those feelings, what should my attitude be toward that feeling?
Shut it down.
I need to shut it down. I need to hate it, right? I need to hate the fact that my heart is pushing back against this. I have to train it to actually love humility, right? And that's tough, right? That's very difficult to learn how to be humble. He likens this to the foster mother versus the mother-in-law. I thought this was an interesting analogy. What do you guys think about this analogy?
Based on past experiences.
Sure. What does he intend with here? Like, what does he think about this? What do you guys think about this analogy? What lesson is he trying to give?
Somebody who's volunteered to be in a position,
Mhm.
somebody who came into the position by like,
Okay. Yes. The bathroom? Okay. So which one is the volunteer and which one was chosen?
The foster mother is the volunteer.
The foster mother is the volunteer, right? She chose to take that position, right? She chose to adopt. And the mother-in-law, she was like kind of inherited, right? Like,
Came with it.
like she came with the package, right?
No choice.
And what else is unique about these relationships?
Both are
Not chosen?
no, I mean
Sure, to an
There's
extent.
no like blood relationship.
Right, neither of them
Yeah,
is a
like-
blood relationship. Neither of these is a blood
they can take
relationship,
advantage or
right?
or abuse it, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
They're important relationships.
Sure.
In both situations, but there's different circumstances surrounding how you got to those relationships.
Not just that. How is power imposed in both of these relationships?
One is more direct.
One is very direct,
Yes.
right? Which one is more direct?
The foster.
The foster mother, clearly, right? This one is imposed. And the mother-in-law, for those newlyweds,
It's like subtle manipulative techniques.
stuck a little on.
Mother-in-law is good for
The mother-
I am good mother-in-law.
MashaAllah. I'm a good mother-in-law too.
Yeah.
Like, so the mother-in-law is actually it's a very unique relationship. The power is definitely exerted indirectly, right? I'm sorry. Or some it's more direct. Some is more direct. Sure. And I'll do a small side discussion on this. This isn't a problem, inshallah. But it's just really interesting on how essentially everybody wants control, right? Essentially, that's what we all want. We all want control. We had spoken about, and Imam Ghazāli had mentioned previously that the easiest way for a lot of people to get control is to gather information, right? Because the more information I have, the more in control I feel of the situation, even if that information isn't necessarily relevant. But in this situation, right, you have someone who volunteers, someone who's inherited, but they both want the same thing, which is control. And how does the nature of the relationship change when both of them are sincere, either to the foster son or to the son-in-law? What changes? So if you have a controlling foster mother, or if you have a controlling mother-in-law, and you have a foster mother who's not controlling, or a mother-in-law who's not controlling, how are those relationships different?
The difference between being harmonious and turbulent.
Okay, so one, there's a lot of harmony in that relationship, absolutely, and the other one is very turbulent. What else?
Praise love. There's no control. Yeah, no one's concerned about who's in control, who's in power, who's not. It's just, like you said, it's harmonious.
Right, there's a lot of harmony in that relationship, for sure. What else?
You're
Yeah.
more willing to be vulnerable
Mm.
and to give up that information just as a oh, I can trust this person with it, so they're not going to use it to control me, but it's like a two-way streak when it's sincere, but when it's like you're controlling, you're like, oh, I want to keep my cards to my chest, like I don't want to say everything to my foster mother and mother-in-law,
Sure.
because they'll use that information.
So what's interesting is that when it's more organic and there's no power struggle, how does the flow of information look?
It's open.
It's more open, right? And it's amazing how when they're seeking control, they can never actually get that information. And when you're not seeking it, what happens? It's volunteered. This is exactly how power works, right? If you don't seek it, the Prophet ﷺ, he said about the dunya, what did he say? He said, the one who runs toward it,
It runs away from it.
right, it runs away from him. He'll never catch it. And the one who runs away from it, right, it's always running behind him. Right, we need to learn how to let go, right? Essentially, it's just a battle of egos. It's just a battle of like having control over situations. It's a battle of having control over others. The reality is like we barely have control of ourselves, right? Like we have very little control over ourselves. Sometimes we have very little control over our actions. Sometimes our hearts overcome what we should actually do, right? Sometimes we love people who we shouldn't love. Sometimes we hate people we shouldn't hate. Sometimes we're happy in situations where we shouldn't be happy. Sometimes our hearts do betray us. But if we are truly sincere and we understand how to channel a lot of those things, it can help balance a lot of the relationships that we have. But just on a side note, how do you balance the relationship between the mother-in-law and the wife? Whose job is it? The husband's job. That's simple as that. If there is a problem between the wife and the mother-in-law, it is the husband's fault. I can guarantee that. And the reason for that is because he's the balance point of that relationship. What is the only thing that's connecting them? Right? It is him. So he has to be the one to bring the balance to that relationship. They can actually never solve anything themselves. Like if you allow the wife and the mother-in-law to try and solve something, there will never be a solution. The solution has to come from the husband. Umar ibn Khattab, he prevented people from following him when they referred to him as Amir al-Mu'mineen while he was reciting the Quran to them, fearing their inclination toward the position. However, he himself continued to deliver sermons and admonitions without refraining from them. Once, a man asked permission from Umar to advise people after Fajr, but Umar refused, fearing that his ego might inflate and he would seek the honor and acceptance of people through preaching. What are some lessons we can take from these stories?
Can you explain that first one?
Sure.
What do you mean by preventing people from following him?
So following him in his recitation of the Quran,
Okay.
right? Maybe they're trying to recite like he recited.
Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu possessed a lot of self-awareness and self-knowledge.
Okay, being self-aware, man, like it's so fundamentally important. How do I become self-aware? Reflection is extremely important, but in order to reflect, I need to be what, first and foremost?
To put yourself in the ground, basically.
Okay, what does that require?
Humility,
It requires humility, absolutely. What else?
honesty.
Honesty, right? It requires humility and honesty. These are the two, and if you look at fundamental characteristics that a Muslim must have, fundamental characteristics that the Prophet ﷺ has passed on and taught us to embody, you will find humility, you will find honesty, you will find trustworthiness. And if an individual is able to have these characteristics, he is able to embody any characteristic that he seeks, whether it be generosity, whether it be courage, whether it be happiness, whatever the case might be. But this is the starting place. This is the starting point. If I'm not humble, if I'm not honest, if I'm not trustworthy, there's no way for me to build any relationship with others, let alone building a relationship with myself and building a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What else can we learn? The first story is a story of self-awareness. And what is the second story?
He knew other people.
Right? And knowing other people too. This is something that's so important. How do you know someone else? Right? Spending time, right? Spending time with someone. Is intuition a thing or no? What do you guys think? Yeah? Oh, you're going to say something?
Was there something like either you had a financial relationship or your neighbor?
So it's from Umar.
From Umar?
Umar, he actually made this statement. He said, you don't know someone until you do business with them,
With them
or you travel with them.
Yeah.
He said, this is how you know someone.
Okay.
So experience is one way of knowing someone. Very simple, right? And he summarized experiencing what? Experiencing business or experiencing travel. Why these two specifically?
Because when you have a financial, you'll see the actual face
Right.
of the...
Yo, when you deal with money, like people's reality comes out. It's actually scary. Like when money comes into the equation, how people can change. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us.
Travel, I don't
And
know.
what about traveling?
Travel, I don't know. It was all...
It was like hardship involved.
Right, because there's financial pressure when it comes to business, right? And in traveling, there are other pressures that come into play. Basically, if you want to know someone, watch them under pressure. Right? That's a great way and an easy way to learn about someone. See how they react every time they're put under pressure, whether that pressure be financial or whether that pressure be social. How do people react? Because under pressure is where people's reality will come out. what is the biggest pressure cooker that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us in? Yeah, no, what is that? There's, I use that term on purpose. I'm sorry? There's a season that we have where Allah puts us in that situation.
Ramadan.
Ramadan, right? And even the word Ramallah, right? It means to burn and to purify. So, how are we put in a pressure cooker during Ramadan?
Well, first of all, you're not eating, and you're
Right.
controlling your, second, you're
Right.
controlling your.
Sure, you're controlling you're controlling your intake and your consumption for sure. You're controlling your eating, your drinking, right? Your intimacy. During the last 10 nights, what else are you losing?
Sleep.
You're losing your sleep. Like, so what am I supposed to learn from Ramadan? How to starve myself?
No, I mean,
All right, okay, I'm learning discipline. Like, what else? In those situations, when
under pressure.
right, what pressure am I under?
You're irritable.
I'm irritable, right? I'm upset, I'm angry. Why? Because I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I haven't been intimate with my spouse, right? I haven't been drinking, I haven't been sleeping. What is a normal human reaction in those circumstances?
Well,
Right, to be upset, right? To be angry, to be irritated. And I'm still commanded to do what during that?
humble, nice.
Right, I still have to be nice to others. And that is the most difficult time to be nice with others. Do you guys notice like the number of fights in the masjid increased during Ramadan?
Yeah, too many.
Like, subhanAllah, I've heard,
Exactly one spot, you know.
yeah, oh, parking,
Yeah.
parking,
Not spot,
praying.
you know, women, you know,
oh, the prayer.
yeah, they're,
So I'm saying, subhanAllah, in things that we wouldn't even imagine people normally fight about, right? People are fighting about parking spaces, people are fighting about praying space. I'm going to pray here to Allah,
yeah,
right? I'm going to stand here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I'm going to fight this person for it.
yeah.
Like, these aren't normal reactions, right? Why? Because people are irritated. I remember one Ramadan, these guys told me, said there were two women fighting over an egg. Like an egg, like a singular egg,
Oh,
right? Like fighting, like physical, like fist fighting over an egg. Again, these aren't normal responses. But when a person is irritated, what does it take to push them over the edge?
Right.
It's like very little. It doesn't take a lot at all. Right? Just the smallest irritation can really push somebody over. But that is the space that I will learn about myself. That is the space I'm going to understand what pressure feels like. That is the space that I need to learn. It doesn't matter how I feel. I am still obligated to respond in a respectful way. And the person who cannot control that, then that is something that we need to be personally, like we need to be really aware of that. That I'm not in a position, you know what? If I'm put under pressure and I react like this, I'm probably going to hurt some people. And I need to learn, I need to better myself, right? I need to put myself through some kind of training so that I don't do that and I don't hurt others and I don't hurt myself. So Imam Ghazāli, he mentions that, okay, well, leadership is something that's actually essential, right? Can society function without governance? No, right? Like you need some type of administrative control. You need some kind of hierarchy so that society can function. And he's saying that because it is essential, there are a number of trials, there are a number of pleasures that are associated with taking those leadership positions, right? There are perks that come into being a leader. And that's why it's discouraged. He's saying, though, even though it's discouraged, people will always what? People will always seek it. Why? Because it is essential, right? You cannot dismiss it. Leadership is an essential function. And regardless of how I feel, and regardless of how I react, and regardless of how I view leadership, there always will need to be leaders, even if those leaders are not what? Even if they're not honest, even if they're not qualified. Where does the accountability come in if leaders aren't qualified? I mean, they're taking advantage. There's a vacuum, right? They're like, oh, well, nobody else is doing it. Let me step in. But does the accountability fall on them? They'll be accountable for what they did, no doubt. But where does the accountability, for the fact that they were even able to get into that position, who is accountable?
Community.
The community is. And how do we know that? Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, from the signs of the hour is that اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جهالا, that people will choose individuals to lead them who are unqualified. The people will choose. And they will either by direct choice, or they're fine with how the leadership is, and they're pleased with that. And this love of power and status is what actually drives this want for leadership. And that's the thing that we have to be aware of, because you have qualified scholars of the past, like qualified people, right? These individuals had knowledge, they had wara', right? They had piety, they had zuhud, they were unaffected, by the world around them. And even those people, what happened? They feared this, and they avoided falling into positions of leadership. Okay, but if everybody avoids it, then what? If everybody avoids being a leader, what happens? Right? Maybe not chaos, right? Because we said what? It's going to exist regardless, right? But my question is like, okay, well, if it's going to exist regardless, and righteous people are avoiding it, what is going to happen for sure?
Evil people.
Right, evil people are going to take those positions, right? There's nothing that can be done. So historically, I would say like in our Islamic history, when have we succeeded politically?
Really?
Just in our entire Islamic history, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until now. Okay, so we have no. Can we doubt the sincerity of the righteous khalifas? No, right? We cannot. That's something that we definitely cannot doubt. How successful was their khilafah?
First two, I think, were successful. With
Okay.
the
So in Abu Bakr's khilafah, what was one of the first things that happened? Apostasy wars. Yeah. Umar's khilafah was pretty stable. How did his khilafah end? He was assassinated. Okay. And then Uthman's khilafah, what happened?
Same thing.
assassinated.
Well, before he got assassinated. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, he was assassinated, and then what happened? Civil War. And the reason I say that is not to belittle their status in any way, shape, or form. Radiallahu anhum ajma'in. The point I want to make is that our success historically has always been through spiritual means. It's never been through political ones, right? It's never been like a top-down thing. And even, subhanAllah, you know what makes our history books different than other history books? Have you guys ever had an opportunity to read like Muslim history books? I'm sorry, okay. What is different about Muslim historians versus other historians?
Particular historians.
I'm sorry? Yeah, Muslim historians. Like, what is unique about Muslim historians?
I think we like to center kind of our wins on like, oh, did we spread Islam beyond where it all started,
Okay. Like expansion.
expansion
Okay.
of that, but not like,
I mean, listen.
conquering sense.
I mean, everybody likes to flex, right?
We do, but like, I don't feel like it's like, is that
Scholars?
earlier?
We focus on scholarship. If you look at our history books, it is full of biographies of who? Scholars. You'll have some history of, oh, this was the Khalifa. Sometimes you'll have a couple lines about him. Sometimes you'll have a little bit more information. But where do they spend a lot of time? In our scholars.
Oh, yeah.
That's where you actually find very, very long, detailed biographies. You'll have a discussion of battles. You'll have a discussion of, what happened in certain years. But you'll also have a discussion on this scholar was born in this date. This is where he lived. This is who his students were. These are some of the books that he wrote. What does that tell us?
We pay a lot of attention to knowledge.
Like, knowledge is so important, right? And knowledge, by extension, where do we take our pride? Right? Not just in our scholarship. We take pride in our religious victories, right? We take pride in our spirituality. We don't dismiss like the political victories, right? That's not something, we don't dismiss it. But when it comes to ranking, is it number one? No. Even our history even the early history, when we look to the Prophet ﷺ or we look to the companions, it's more of a discussion of their piety. It's more of a discussion of their roles, right? It's more of a pride in their belief, more so than like, very, very specific historical events that happened. And I believe that's where our victory is, very honestly, right? If I know like this, like it sucks, right? It's like, oh, I wish we had more righteous people in leadership positions, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we had the most righteous people in leadership positions, right? Like the righteous of the righteous, like, the cream of the crop of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had all of the leadership positions historically. And that's not why we celebrate them, right? Isn't that crazy? Right? They were the leaders of the ummah, and we don't celebrate them because they're the leaders. We celebrate them because they're Ashra Mubashirin, right? Because they were guaranteed paradise. We celebrate them because of their sincerity, right? These are the reasons we celebrate. Not because it's like, oh, because the governance was like this or the governance was like that. It's like, that, yeah, that's good, right? We're like, yeah, that's good, that's great. Like, it's nice, but...
Like the qualities, right?
Yeah, like it was, their qualities are actually what mattered, and the qualities are what really are important to us. So, like I said, sometimes this, like looking at this stuff, it can be discouraging, right? It's like, oh, all of the Muslim leaders suck today, but it's like, it's okay. They've sucked historically. It's not like, we don't live like in a unique era of like more not pious. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, they're like the Ottomans were so pious. Like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, it's like, or it's like, oh, what about the Abbasids? It's like, no. It's like, it's not. There's no reason to look at those times romantically. If we're going to look at anything romantically, it should be our religion, right? It should be our religious history. It should be our spirituality, right? These are the things we should really take pride in. Yeah.
So do you think, like, as Muslims, particularly like Western Muslims, we should focus more so like on dawah and like these religious and spiritual aspects rather than politics and getting so involved in dawah?
Yeah, and not just that. I'm saying, going from, how early can I go? Let's start with Clinton, right? Because I think that's where Muslims were probably, like, Bush before him. That's where the Muslims were like really involved. From Bush through Clinton and Bush again, and then Obama, and then Trump, and then like Biden. Have we gained a lot? Right? I don't, like, if you look at the overall scheme of things, I don't really feel like I don't think we gained a lot. Where I think we have been successful? Building masajid, building funeral homes, building Islamic schools, talking about building financial institutions now, talking about building business organizations and collaborations. Like that's, like that to me is like really, that is like really inspiring for me. And that's something where I'm like, man, I think we're doing something right. I don't like, even you have people come out like, oh, you need to vote for this. I don't care, man. Like, it doesn't make that big a difference to me. Like, I think there are certain local issues, right? Like, I think it's important to understand who your county supervisor is. I think it's important to understand who sits on the zoning boards. I think it's important to understand even like soil boards and who sits on like the school board, because those are things that directly affect me and my family and my home, right? Dude, like the federal stuff, it's all theatrics. Do you think they care about us? No. Like, are they really going to solve my problem? Allah has given me too much agency for me to rely on anyone else. Right? He's given me too many tools for me to think that a senator or a governor or a representative is going to do something for me. And the success of this institution or your individual successes, does it matter who was president or who wasn't? Like where you've reached today in your life, would it have mattered had it been anyone else in those positions? Absolutely not. I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us all successful in different ways, regardless of who's leading. Right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really trickle down to us. The people who are passionate about it, may Allah bless them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm cool. Like, I think everybody needs to be passionate about something. I just don't think it's that big a deal. I truly think our success is in the cleansing and the purification of our hearts, when we learn not to like cut people off, when we learn to like actually allow someone to park their car even if I'm late, where we learn like, okay, not to step over people or play with our phones or like bother other people. Like, I think if we learn how to do those things, if instead of someone coming to me and asking me for money and we have a handout, it's like, no, you know, I have a business, come and work for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's where I think spiritually we're pretty successful. There's no masjid I can go, like I would go to and they'd be like, oh no, Pakistanis can't pray here. Right? I've yet to see a masjid like that. Or like Nigerians can't pray here, or Kenyans can't pray. Right, you know, alhamdulillah, I think we've gotten unity, like in a spiritual sense. Like even Hajj, nobody's like, oh, you know, no Sudanese allowed to make Hajj. You don't see that, man. Like that doesn't exist. And even when it comes to zakat, it's like, oh, my zakat is not going to white people, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's doing that, right? That's not happening in the Muslim community. I think religiously we're actually very cohesive, and I think there's a lot of unity there that we need to be proud of. But I think in the interpersonal dealings, there's a lot of work that's required and needed, and that can only come through tazkiyah. Right? It can only come through actually purifying our hearts, understanding humility, understanding honesty, understanding how to be trustworthy. Right? But that requires like a level of humility and vulnerability that I think that we haven't reached that threshold yet. But I think we can. I think we can, and I think there's a good movement toward that, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless us. But we'll stop here, inshallah. We'll continue the discussion next week, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Jazakumullah.